Welcome to Art with Dianne Mahaffee. Today we will have a pre-watercolor lesson which is designed for those folks who know nothing about watercolor but would like to learn. This pre-watercolor lesson will teach you technique as well as important terms and things you need to know to make you a successful watercolor painter. If you sincerely pay attention to this short pre-watercolor lesson, it will lay that foundation so that you will have more confidence as you do the 6 training paintings that will follow. These lessons were developed so that 5th grade and up to college age and beyond will be able to understand and succeed. So, let's get started. Sharp edge is a very important term to know that I will refer to often. It's when you have a sharp edge between the dry paper and where you have your paint. In order to get that, you have to have dry then wet. Soft edge is where you put the paint on, and sometimes the paper will be wet here, or either you'll come back with your wet paintbrush and just wet that area so it'll just give you a soft edge. You use soft edges in clouds and in the sky. Wet on wet means you're putting wet paint on wet paper. Wet on dry means you're putting wet paint on dry paper. So wet paint on dry paper gives you sharp edges. Wet paint on wet paper gives you soft edges. That's also called a wash. Save the white is something you want to do in watercolor because you don't use white paint. Save the white of your paper. Value, that one is very important. In this watercolor set right here, I used the praying red, and that is pretty much all pigment. And I added a little bit more water to my brush and a little less pigment as I worked my way this way. So you have lighter values of red, darker values of red. Pink is a light value of red. Prime the paper means you'll wet your paper with 2 layers of water. You will get to see me do that when we get ready to do our first painting lesson of the training painting. Prime the paper. That's I'll refer to that often. So those are some very important terms. All right, then you need to know some things about wash. A flat wash means it's just pretty much a flat color. Like if you were going to paint the wall in your house, you may want a flat color. Very seldom do you use a flat wash in watercolor. Wet on wet wash. This is where I prime the paper with 2 layers of clean water. While it's wet and shiny, I start putting my reds on, purples. Sometimes you turn your paper and let it give you those soft edges where it mingles as it changes into another color. That is used, wet on wet is used a great deal when you're doing skies. Gradated wash is one that's used a lot, especially in a sky that may not have a lot of clouds. Start dark with a lot of pigment from your paint set, and you add a little bit more water and a little bit more water as you go down your paper. So you're going from dark purple, as it is here, all the way to the lightest purple you can get. Dark, medium, light. So you're getting different values. Streaked wash is where you prime your paper with 2 layers of water, put your pigment in a location, I did it right here, and tilt your paper while it's all wet and shiny, and when it gets where the way you want it to be, lay your paper down flat. Alright, a few more terms you need to know about is the color wheel. All beginner watercolor artists make a color wheel. Start off with yellow, blue, and red because those are the primary colors. If you just think of your color wheel as a clock with yellow being in the 12 o'clock position, blue is in the 4 o'clock position, red is in the 8 o'clock position. Alright, and then you mix yellow and blue together, which you should know would give you green. So you'd put your green in 2 o'clock. Then add a little more yellow to it, and you'll have yellow-green. A little more blue, because see, you're close to blue, you'd get a blue-green. You really, if you're not familiar with the color wheel, you need to study it, because there's so much to learn about it, and so many times you need to refer back to it. All right, again, yellow and red mixed together makes orange. There's the orange, but if it leans a little more toward this, you have yellow-orange, then red-orange, and so forth. So yellow, red, and blue are the most important colors of all. They're the primary colors. You can mix them to get all these others. So if you only have enough money to buy 3 paints, you need to get yellow, red, and blue, because you can get a wide array of other ones. The secondary colors are the ones that are in between the primaries, like green and purple, or purple-violet, or orange. All right, so if you make a color wheel, as you see, I have an old one here that I made when I was at Winthrop. I have my yellow in the 12 o'clock, and then red and blue 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and then I got my other ones in between. So make a color wheel. It will teach you a lot. You can either freeze the screen and refer to this, or find it on the internet or in a book. All right, after you make a color wheel, you'll need to make a value scale. This is also called a gray scale, but you can do one with color as well and get different values of red, or you may want to do different values of purple. All right, so make a value scale and play around with it and see how you can get it to gradually go from light to dark. And then the last thing about the terms that I need to tell you is this is a very important exercise to paint. I'm going to do it right here, right now, so you can see how to do it. I'm going to, you just get a pencil and a piece of watercolor paper, and you'll draw some spheres. But you may say, well, what kind of paint do I need? What kind of brushes do I need? I would suggest, as a beginner, to get Praying Professional Watercolor. Just go to Amazon and you'll see it. It's a lot of times they run out of it at Michael's and Hobby Lobby. P-R-A-N-G, Praying Professional, or it may say Praying Semi-Moist. Every 6 months they change the look of the front, so you can't exactly go by this one. So that is a good one. But do not get Crayola, do not get Rose Art, or some Master's Touch. Stay away from those real inferior watercolor sets. They're just for little kids to have fun with. And get some, at least this, or get some tube colors. And if you get tube paints, fine. Get a palette, squeeze them in your palette, and let it set up a day or two before you start using them, because a lot of times they're too sticky and wet and will give you a lot of trouble as you're learning. But this is excellent to learn, and it only costs about $8 to $10, and it'll go a long way. All right, so Praying, I highly suggest for beginners, and get at least 2 watercolor brushes. This is a flat 1-inch brush. It's 1 inch across. It's flat. I can paint skies, backgrounds. I can use I can paint it with my corners. It'll hold a lot of water. And just make sure you're not getting acrylic brushes or oil brushes. Make sure it says watercolor. And last of all, you know, I have so many brushes, but I use these 2 all the time. You can tell I've had both of these at least 20, 30 years, I forget. And they're still excellent, just like they were when I bought them. This is a 10-inch round. 10-inch round. It's called a round because when you get it wet, it stays round. And I can, make shapes with it. I can use the point, and it's not flat. So you need a flat and a round. Number 10 round. Not 10-inch, but number 10 round. All right, so much about materials. Oh, and make sure you get some watercolor paper. You can't paint on copier paper. It will just get clay. It'll get crumbs all over it, and it'll tear and rip, and it'll get wet on both sides. It'll just be awful. Get watercolor paper, and you can even get it in a pad. All right, so I'm going to draw a circle here. And please don't go hunting for a jar to make your circles. Just freehand them. They don't have to be perfect. All right. After you do that, get a ruler and make a table or background. And I didn't even need to do it over there, so that you have something like this, and that's all you need to draw. And then let's start with the red. Now, do you see how three-dimensional that looks? I have a highlight. It goes to a shadow because the light's not getting it over here. See, that arrow means the light's coming in from this way. It's throwing a cast shadow over here. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And this is a good exercise to do. Wet your biggest brush, a wash brush or a 1-inch flat, and prime the sphere, which is actually a circle because it's 2D right now, but I'm going to make it look 3D. All right. I'm saving a little dry spot for my paper. All right, after you get, I'm putting another layer of water on it. That's called priming your paper. All right, it's really shiny, so I'm going to come right over here to the red. And I'm going to put red on. And notice it just kind of moves with the water. And it doesn't move into the dry area. Make it a little more intense. And I'm using watercolor terminology so you'll learn it. All right. Now, before you do anything else, you need to make this side darker because my light's coming in from here. So I'm going to go to the opposite of red, which is green. And put that over here. And while I have this on my brush, make a cast shadow. Cast shadows always touch the object. So there it is, just that quick and simple. All right, now I'm going to wash out my brush because I've got the reddish color on there. Wash it out. Scrape it on the side just a little bit so it won't be dripping all along to here. I'm going to prime this. All right, I'm saving a little bit of dry right here because I want that to be my highlight. All right, that's really dry. Now this is wet and shiny because I've got 2 layers of water. I'm going to my yellow. Getting some yellow on the brush. Just touch it to the wetness and you'll just see it spreads out. We call that bleeding, sometimes bleeding out, which we want it to do most of the time. There's times we want to be a little more controlling, but not for this exercise, and lots of times. All right, so I've got my yellow on. Now the opposite of yellow is purple. Purple is always beside the blue. Just go right to the purple. Put it on the opposite side from the light. Notice it turns into that perfect shadow color for a yellow object. While it's on my brush, it gives you the perfect cast shadow color. Alright, so now these look three-dimensional. That looks very flat. Alright, I'm going to do the orange one, but before I do, I'm going to show you why on the red one I chose green. When you see a color wheel, if you look straight across the color wheel, you'll see green. That is the opposite. Red and green are opposites. A lot of people think it's red and blue, but it's not. Red and green. Anytime you have a red object, its shadow should have some green in it. Alright, yellow. Look completely opposite the wheel. You'll see purple. That's why I added purple. Does it stay purple? No. When it mixes with that yellow, it just makes a beautiful shadow color that's perfect for a yellow object. Alright, this one's going to be orange. Let's find orange. Opposite the wheel gives you blue. That's what we're going to shadow it with. Alright, I'm going to rinse out my brush, prime my paper, and save a little dry spot. Alright, now I'm going to prime it again. It's not really primed if it just has one layer of water. The first layer sinks into the paper. The second layer floats on the surface. Alright, next is going to be orange. Put that orange on. It just kind of follows the water. It stays out of the dry area so that we can have a sharp highlight. Alright, if you remember, opposite of orange is, you're right, blue. Look how that blue just changes into this sort of a beautiful grayness. That's the perfect shadow color for an orange object. Alright. Well, there you have it. That's the main terms and everything that you need to know before you get started on your painting. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you will practice this. Practice making a value scale, a color wheel. Practice your sharp edges and your soft edges. Make a value scale of all the colors that's in your set. Get that set ready. And stay tuned and be ready for our first training painting.